up, Blerd Squad, and welcome back to another episode of Blerd Up, where we talk about all things movies, music, TV, and gaming, all with a blurred twist. We're your host, I'm Killer Cam.
And I'm Monique.
And oh my goodness.
Yeah.
We're coming at you with a review for the season premiere of Lovecraft Country.
Yo, I wasn't ready.
Blown away.
I wasn't ready.
Blown away. Now listen, here's the thing, because we already had high expectations for it. Misha Green, known for Underground. You've got Jordan Peele and J.J. Abrams executive producing. This show is actually based on a novel by Matt Ruff, which I hear is also pretty good, but I have avoided it because I wanted to watch the show at first. But Jesus.
There was a lot in this first episode, and we'll get into it. But before we start getting into it, we want to let you guys know that this will contain spoilers. So if you guys have not watched the first episode yet of Lovecraft Country, please stop. And you want to be surprised by it. I know sometimes I like to go into it with spoilers, but if you don't want to go into it with spoilers, please stop this video, go watch it, and then come right back to us.
Yeah, so I guess what we're doing is kind of a review / breakdown. Because here's the thing, you throw on like an action-packed movie, you know, I can watch that as mind-numbing, blah blah blah. But this show is very cerebral.
Yeah.
And with these types of things, there's so many Easter eggs in them that you can't help but to want to break it down. So today what we'll probably do is just kind of run through the episode and kind of throw out little nuggets that we noticed here. But before we do that, definitely drop down. If you're wanting to stay up to date with our reviews, reactions, breakdowns of Lovecraft Country, please make sure you hit that subscribe button. Throw us a like, man. If you are really digging this content, that's how we know that you want to continue to see more of this. And again, this episode was so full of information. I watched it twice.
Yeah, me too.
And I still know that there's things that I probably didn't pick up on that you probably did. So drop down in those comments and let us know, because that's what we're here for. We love to hear it.
Yeah.
All right. So
you've been warned.
Spoilers.
We're about to jump into the review right now. So again, if you don't want to hear these spoilers, stop this video, go watch the episode, and come right back to us. So you've been warned.
Okay.
All right.
Lovecraft Country, Season 1, Episode 1, Sundown.
All right. So this episode starts off crazy from the get. We get like what is it? Kind of like an apocalyptic planet with like UFOs, aliens like roaming around, and we have Atticus, and he's like wandering. Well, first it's like a kind of like a war type situation, and then it turns into
morphs.
Morphs into something greater. And we see aliens, UFOs roaming around, and he's scared. He doesn't know what's going on. We see Jackie Robinson saving the day, like killing a monster with a bat, which I thought was awesome. I was like, but like as soon as he kills the monster with the bat, it kind of comes to it. And I know there's a specific name for that monster. It's something I can't pronounce. It's Shitsu. Something. But another thing that we see in this opening sequence is she's presented as an alien, but it's Jamie Chung's character, is being down and kind of like entices Atticus, which is played by Jonathan Majors, but entices him, and it's a lot going on basically in this first episode. And when it comes to a point where you think it can't get any weirder or scarier, we see Atticus wake up. Yeah. Basically.
Now here's the thing, they definitely set the tone of the show with that first segment, because immediately when you're watching it, it starts off normal, like you would expect it to, but then it quickly shifts, and that's what caught my attention like major. I was already like gonna watch it, but when I saw that, I was like, oh, I need to pay attention. The other thing that I noticed about Jamie Chung's character, by the way, if you guys haven't seen or not familiar with her, she was in Sucker Punch. And she was also in that show called The Gifted, I believe. But the thing that I noticed about her alien character, she was kind of like seductive / sinister. There was something about her that was just kind of like, I know you, but I don't quite understand what you want from me or why you're here. It was just kind of weird. It was like, I don't know. I can't even explain it. It was just off. And that immediately caught my attention, which we'll come back to later in the episode. So he wakes up, and I guess he was like reading a book or something. He's on the bus headed back to Chicago because he needs to go find his father.
Yeah.
And the thing that I thought was really not interesting, but it seemed really realistic, his conversation with the woman that was on the bus about them riding down roads with racist people's names. And one thing that she pointed out to him, he was talking about the story and how it was based on a Confederate soldier or ex-Confederate soldier, and she was like, no, if you're a Confederate soldier, you fought for slavery, you don't get to put X in front of it. And I was like, right on, sister.
But then we immediately jump into just basically the time period that we're in right now. We see like what the bus breaks down, and they're sitting there outside, waiting for I guess a ride to come pick them up, and it pulls up, and this truck full of white people, and as soon as the truck pulls up, you can already tell Atticus is figuring that in his head. It's like, we about to walk for a little bit, you know? So we're immediately thrust into, okay, this is the time period, this is how it is, let's go.
So, he ends up back in Chicago. We're introduced to Uncle George. And Courtney
Hippolyta.
Courtney B. Vance and Ingenue Ellis. By the way, just side note with Ingenue Ellis, she was slighted for her awards. She should have got an award for that Clark Sisters movie, but I digress. But anyway, we're introduced to those two in a very intimate setting, which I really enjoyed because it's like you don't necessarily see that on TV. But they're discussing he's got to take a trip, so apparently he does the Green Book, and he keeps the Green Book updated. And he's got to take a trip, and she's like, well, I can go for you this time if you want. And it's just kind of like, oh.
I was like, oh, Black Love. I know, right? But then, Uncle George immediately is like, no, you can't go. There's too much going on out in the world for you to be out there by yourself. So. But they do end up, continuing to have their intimate moment, and outside,
the walls are thin.
We come to character Diana, or I think they call her Dee in the show, where she's beginning to draw this comic. Which apparently we learn later on in the episode that she draws this comic for her father for every trip. So it's a new comic every trip. But she's basically using a picture of somebody to draw that comic. And I couldn't figure out in the episode who exactly, because it comes up later in the episode too, of that same picture of that same woman. But I couldn't really figure out who that person was. So I think we're going to find out a little bit more about that character later on.
Definitely. So Atticus makes it back, connects with Uncle George, and they start talking about his father. Uncle George's like, I didn't know your daddy was missing until the landlord showed up wanting his rent, because apparently his father has had some troubles and he goes on benders and stuff like that. So him being gone is not that big of a deal until nobody's heard back from him.
Right.
And apparently the father sent Atticus a letter talking about, oh my God, my brain's blanking. Just basically how he's been tracking down his mom's side of the family and stuff like that. And now Atticus has to go find him. Yeah. So. Yeah. Then we're introduced to Letty.
Yeah, Letty basically at the block party basically. So there's a big, huge block party, which I wish I was a part of.
It looked so fun, didn't it?
It looked so fun. I was like, I wish I was there.
And Letty is played by Journey Smollett. Sorry, Journey Smollett. I'm sorry, it's a habit. It's a habit.
But we do, meet Letitia's character, and right off the bat, you kind of get the feel of, what she's done in the past and the type of person that she is, because she has her sister, and I forgot her name. I think I have it written down here, but her sister is actually like singing on stage at the block party. And, she's asking the audience, like, y'all got any requests? And, Journey Smollett or Letitia is like, I forgot which song she suggested, something with a shake or something like that. And immediately you see her sister's eyes go like this.
Like here. This.
What is it going to be this time? So immediately when she shot her that look, I was like, oh, that's how it is.
Yeah.
But
They get up on stage, they rock it out, and then they come down and they start talking, and immediately you could tell, all right, their relationship is strained.
Yeah.
And Letitia, she's a little bit bougie.
Yeah. Really?
She expects a lot.
Right. I mean, I think her sister gets on to her because she's like, what do you think you're going to do? Find a job downtown in one of those department stores? Right. And Letty's like, yeah, I am. And she was like, girl, I've been applying up there for 3 years and nothing happened. So, yeah, she's a protester, too. I think we hear later on in the episode that she protested down in D.C. and used some money that she wasn't supposed to be using to bail some of her friends out of jail. So we immediately, right off the bat, kind of get a look and feel of how Letty's character is.
Especially when she was complaining. So the sister knew something was coming. She was like, I don't want nothing. Well, maybe a place to stay. And
just a place to stay.
Oh, here we go. Yeah. And then she starts complaining about where she's staying at. Like, what happened to the Lenderman and stuff?
Right.
I was like, girl, you just got back. Calm down.
Right.
And it kind of was one of those moments where it's like, okay, you see the dynamic. Her sister needed to take her down, and now she's like, reason I don't stay there no more is because of Mama's funeral. Mm-hmm. And then it's like, ooh.
Yeah.
It was nice that she kind of put it as, I'm not bringing it up to jab you.
Yeah, but since you brought it up,
that's what it is,
Yeah, but at the same block party, Letty lays eyes for the first time in a while on Atticus, or Tick is his nickname, and immediately you can tell she like, even I was like,
he ain't so little no more. I know. Did she call him a little skinny kid with glasses?
But I take offense to that. But yeah, that basically we see that's the first time she actually is seeing Tick again for a while. I think we jump to, after the block party, to Tick going to his father's regular spot of drinking. He passes by the army recruiter who is like, you get to travel around the world, and the side eye Tick gives that army recruiter. I was like
really?
You should have just been like, lies. He lied to you, y'all. Instead of giving him that side eye.
Which is a huge, I'm glad they threw that in there, because there is this misconception that being in the armed forces back then was the same for everyone. It was not.
Yeah.
It was not. And a lot of people who came home from some of those wars never were able to get right. They didn't get the certain benefits that maybe the white soldiers did, coming back. So I thought that was really cool that they threw that in there, because again, it sets the tone as to what we're really about to be dealing with.
So so basically what they say is, back then when you joined the military as a I hate this word, but a colored person, basically you're a cook.
Yeah.
And that's all you're ever going to be. Yeah, so. But anyway,
not to bring the mood down.
Anyways.
But he heads back to his hotel, I guess, wherever he's staying, and he calls.
It's his father's house.
Father's house, okay.
Because they actually center in on some dents in the wall, some cracks in the wall.
That
from
makes
basically,
sense now.
we hear, it's from the last time Tick was home and fought with his father.
That's right.
But yeah, Tick does, and I'm not sure if this was maybe after the block. This might have been after the block party, before he goes to the bar to try to track down his dad. But he makes a call to South Korea, and you hear this voice on the other line that says, hey Tick, is that you? You went home, and then it's a little silence, and it's like, you shouldn't have.
Right.
So I think that's Jamie Chung's character.
I think so, and I think that kind of goes back to what I was saying about her character when it first showed up, and she's like the alien, and just like her mannerisms when she was around him. So when because I had to listen to that call twice, I'm like, wait, what? Like what's going on? But I think that kind of locks in how I felt when we saw her at the beginning. It was like, okay, there's something here that's off, and I need to understand it. So more episodes, please.
In that moment too, it was like really like, I don't know, that moment just felt me. I was like, as soon as she was like, you shouldn't have, I was like, ooh, what you done got yourself into, Tick? Like, I was trying to figure out what's going on.
Right.
But yeah. But anyways, he goes to the bar, one of his dad's regular bars, to try to track down his father. He gets some information from, I guess, the owner of that bar. But you see, and he goes out back to talk to the owner of the bar. But you see, actually, in the background, there's a silver car sitting outside. Right. So that's the first appearance of the silver car that we see in this episode, or Bentley. I think it's a Bentley.
Yeah, important.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think, what is it? The next day, George and Tick are preparing to go out on their Green Book trip. And they've agreed on this trip. They're going to actually try to find the town of Artem, which is where Tick's father said he needed to come to in the letter that he wrote, which is really tricky because I think it was a play on like is it Arkham?
Arkham.
Yeah, which is the publisher for H.P. Lovecraft's books. Yeah. Yeah. So they're getting ready to go on this trip, and all of a sudden, Letty come out of nowhere, put her stuff in the car, and Tick like, "Where are you going?" and Uncle George is like, "Yeah, we gonna give her a ride to her brother's house, Yeah. But we see, Uncle George's family, Hippolyta and Dee come out, and Dee gives Uncle George this comic. I guess she gives him a comic every time he goes out on his Green Book trip. On these Green Book trips. Basically after that they're pretty much on the road, and they're traveling from north down to the good old south.
One thing that I did think was cool, referring back to the letter, when they're discussing the letter, Uncle George is like, "You mean like the home of the corpse reanimator and stuff like that," which are Lovecraft's works. And by the way, guys, let me just say this in case anybody didn't get the memo. H.P. Lovecraft was a huge racist. So the fact that this novel and the fact that this show exists, to me, is hilarious. And the fact that it's good, it's being told in a way where it's just kind of like, we own this story now. It's ours. I just find absolutely magnificent.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
But they hit the road, start off in the Midwest. Yeah.
I think they actually start off the trip with a, which was, I think, was so incredible. It was a monologue by James Baldwin that he basically was stated in a debate with him and William Buckley Jr., who was a pro-segregation white conservative, wealthy white conservative. But to listen to those words as you see them start the trip down south, and all the images they go through as he's James Baldwin saying this monologue, I'm just like, here we go.
And I mean, the imagery is strong. You see a billboard that says, I can't remember the exact words, but it's basically saying it's a sundown town. Inward. You know what happens here when the sun goes down, or something like that.
You see, black father and daughter trying to get ice cream, and the white people who are working in the ice cream place is not paying attention to them, talking to other white people on the other side, and you just see them just the black father and daughter just waiting for them to get done. Atticus and Letty go to a gas station, and they're sitting there having a conversation, and all of a sudden out the back there's a white guy being racist, basically. I'm not going to repeat what he does, but
But just the brazen and the entitled, that you feel like you can do that to another human being. Especially with Atticus, he's swole. That ain't no small dude. And the dude who was doing it, I was like, man, you.
I know you see his muscles poking out of his shirt.
Stop.
Are you serious?
But again, it just speaks to that time. People feel like they have the authority to do anything that they want to. Can't do that today. A couple of people missing crayons, so you do not want to do that.
Anyways, but basically they end up, Uncle George is pretty adamant about this, and I feel like this is one of the best parts in this episode, because Uncle George is pretty adamant about going to this place called Lydia's. He hears friendly to the Negro community, and he wants to add it to the Green Book. So they don't actually find Lydia's. They actually find another diner that looks to be where Lydia's was. Right. And Tick and Letty is like, man,
it's hold on, because when they first go in it, you can kind of tell I shouldn't be here. But Uncle George is Uncle George, and you know how when your elders get on something, sometimes you just go along with it.
And it made me realizing at that point that Uncle George is like, no, this needs to change. He's one of those people who like, my money is good as anybody else's. This needs to change. This, and this. You know, and it kind of tells you Tick and Letty's reaction. Tick is like, you know, one of those people who is just like, I understand how it is. I'm defiant, but this is the way it is. Yeah. Letty's more so is like, you know, this is the way it is. Right. You know, I protest against it and I want it to change, but you know. Yeah. Yeah.
But so, so they get in the diner and they sit down and Uncle George is like, oh, we want some coffee and he's like getting about
what's good here, right. You know.
And the I guess the bus boy and the guy behind the counter, they're looking at him like,
did you just walk in here and ask for coffee? Right. Yeah. So eventually one of the guys at the counter just straight up leaves. Yeah. And the busboy goes in the back, and they're, you know, we still got Tick, George, and Letty sitting at this table like, what y'all want to eat? You know, and Letty and Tick is like, maybe we should just go, you know. And they finally give up because Uncle George is like, no, we don't eat here. So Letty gets up and goes to the restroom, and you know, while she's back there, she overhears the busboy on the phone like, no, I didn't serve them, you know, after what happened to Lydia. And I was like, uh-oh. Hold on. I was like, wait a minute.
Now, at the same time, Atticus is like, remind me why the White House is right again. And he starts going, oh, because in the 1800s.
The War of 1812, when the slaves rebuilt the White House, you know. They had to paint the walls white because of to hide the burn marks. And boy, so at the same time, he moves a tile from the floor and he sees burnt wood up under there.
They done burnt Lydia's place and took it over.
At that moment, Letty runs out the back and she's like, y'all gotta get up. We gotta get the out of here, you know.
I have never heard Journey Smollett Bell cuss so much or so loud than in this moment. It was the energy, which was the appropriate energy.
Yes. And again, Atticus and Tick gave the appropriate energy to her.
Church on fire.
Letty was like, we gotta get out of here.
For those of y'all who don't know what church on fire means, it's basically if you see one black person running, that means you run.
Everybody, you run.
You don't stop and well, wait, what's going on? Yeah, you haul ass and ask later.
Yeah, so what I thought was interesting here, because when they make it to the car, Letty's like, you know, in the driver's seat, and Uncle George is like, I want to drive. And she like, if you don't get your butt in this car right now. So this begins this chase of, you know, people from the community chasing down Letty, George, and Tick in they call their car Woody, basically Woody, down the road, and Letty's driving, and Uncle George all this time is like, girl, you gonna kill us, girl. And at this point, I don't know if anybody else noticed, but till this point, George called Letty girl. He kept calling her girl. And so at this point, Letty got fed up and was like, my name isn't girl. It's Letitia effing Lewis. And Uncle George looked at her like, okay.
I'm sorry, that has to be the best scene I have seen in a long time. Because I literally hollered.
I absolutely loved it too, because at this point Letty was like, I'm as strong as y'all both, so don't tell me I can't drive and get us out of this situation, or I'm gonna wreck y'all, because if you don't stop calling me girl, like I ain't your girl, I ain't your mammy, I ain't nobody, you better call me by my name, right? You know. And I was like,
she had it. But like, there's this truck full of white guys and they're shooting at them, and then I was surprised Atticus was packing. He had a
little gun that he got from his father's house. So they're, you know, speeding down this road trying to get away from these people, and they see another car, and it's this silver Bentley coming to head them off, basically. So Letty eventually, you know, is able to avoid missing the silver Bentley, right? And the silver Bentley's kind of protecting them, trying to get in the way of this other truck that's following them. And all of a sudden, they don't hit the Bentley, but all of a sudden, this truck full of, you know, people following them just turns over, and I think all of them were pretty much dead, because they were in the back of the truck. They got flown everywhere.
The way that they constructed this scene, though, was so crazy, because I was literally on my, like, when the Bentley was introduced, so I was like, okay, now who's that? What are they here to do? And then I'm thinking that they're a part of the chase, and then I'm like, oh, they're protecting them. So I was like, that was really smart. That was really cool. I liked how they did that because again, you're invested in the scene.
Yeah, and it was I was like, if y'all don't go faster, like this whole scene had me like, oh my gosh. Very suspenseful, very suspenseful. Yeah. So they finally get to Letty's brother's house, and Letty's brother has done some research in terms of, Byford and Devon County and Arnhem and where they're trying to go. So basically, Letty's brother gives them information that Byford was, pretty big on, having a lot of witches and stuff there. And George stops him and he's like, so are you telling me this town was founded by witches? And he goes, no, witch hunters. And I think that was actually a big moment and clue in terms of what is going to happen in the rest of this episode and the rest of the series.
Definitely. Now, give it up for
I'm sorry, before you say that though, because he also says that they don't like outsiders.
Right.
He says basically it was founded by witch hunters and they don't like outsiders.
Right. Now here's the thing, give it up for the brother for having so much intel, because he had files and files.
Yeah,
and
I was like, they done had Google back then. I was like, how did he get all this information?
And again, it's another thing where this is almost misleading because they don't like outsiders. Immediately, where my head went. And I was like, oh, it's going to be one of those towns or whatever. And he starts showing like the sheriff or whatever and shows his part of his NAACP complaint file.
Yeah, like it's this thick and that's only like a part of it. Yeah. And I'm just like, oh, this ain't going very well.
Here we go. But a lot of information spilled in that scene, which I thought was really important because, again, it's giving us clues. They're hand-feeding us stuff throughout this episode, which is very important to this episode. It kind of tells you where it's leading up to. So, now Letty and her brother get into like a shouting match.
They get into an argument and you hear the reasons why, because Letty, hasn't been around much. She missed her mother's funeral and he's mad at that. He's the one who gave her the money to, live off of, and she ended up using it to get her people out of prison. Yeah. But while they're having this big blowout, George and Tick are outside having this conversation, and Tick is talking to Uncle George about how he doesn't understand how him and his dad turned out to be so different. And George goes into this conversation about, when Tick's father was younger, he was little and small and took the brunt of, I guess abuse that was in their family. And George goes on to say, I should have protected him. I should have been there for him. And Tick is like, no, you should have protected me. Like you didn't protect me either.
Right.
So at some point, Letty and her brother are like, getting really rowdy in this argument, and Tick turns around to go inside, and Uncle George stops him and is like, it's family business. And I was like, you just did the same thing. Now, Tick just wanted to go protect Letty, and you just stopped him from doing the same thing you said you should have done.
Now here's the thing that I caught with that, because that pissed me off. Remember James Baldwin talking about the American dream and how it's being hindered for racism or whatever? I almost took this as a part of it, is like, you're kind of hindering the dream of people as well, because here it is, you've got this cycle of abuse passed down in the family. Here's an opportunity to stop it, and you're telling him to mind his business. Yeah. Like, people, we got to clean up our own house too. Like,
actually, first clean up our own house first. Before we go elsewhere.
So that made me side-eye him a little bit, because I was like, now wait a minute. You can't have that view on one part of it and then just pick and choose where it applies to.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, that argument went on longer than it needed to. They needed to separate and cool off.
Yeah, yeah.
But again, it just kind of gives you history as to, what Atticus and what George had to deal with,
Yeah. So, yeah.
And now what Letty's dealing with.
And I think he actually explains in that conversation with him about how the last argument he had with his father, that's why we saw those holes in his father's apartment. And he was like, last argument we had, Dad lost, so I protect myself. Anyways, next day, Atticus and George are, getting ready, cleaning up Woody. Getting ready to go out on the road, and Letitia comes out, puts her stuff in the car. I guess because she was originally supposed to stay with her brother, but she was like, I ain't staying with you.
I almost wonder if she was.
For the next thing that's coming, me too. Because they actually get on the road and they're in Devon County.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, but all the shit hits the fan in Devon County.
Pretty much,
all of it.
So they're driving down this dirt road trying to find Artem. There's supposedly supposed to be like a road that leads to Artem, but they can't find this road. So they're frustrated. They get pulled over, and Atticus and Letty get out the car, and we see in the background
here come
Sheriff coming Popo. Now, while Letty and Atticus are actually out of the car, they actually hear a noise, and Letty's like, "What do you think that was?" And Tick's like a shogog or shagalog or something like that. I have no idea how to pronounce it. And she's like, "What is a shagalog?" And he's like, a creature with eyes all around and a blob and everything. But yeah, we see in the background Sheriff pull up, and he's just like, "Everybody get out the car."
Right. Now hold off real quick because I want to go back to Artem. When they were looking on the map, there was no markings for this town. No. It's literally like this place does not exist.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So I thought that was interesting because in my head I'm like, well, are they even gonna find this place? Is it real? Like, what's happening here? But well, I guess we see.
Yeah. So, Sheriff tells everybody to get out the car. He's giving all of them a hard time, and he's like, you've ever heard of a sundown town? Well, this is a sundown country or county. Sorry, I'm sorry, I got into my country accent, messed everything up. But anything. So at this point, George, Letty, and Tick are like, we need to get the heck out of here. Right. So, I think at this point the sheriff is like pretty much already decided that he's not going to let them go because Tick is like before they pull out, he's like, is it legal to make a U-turn here? Because he's trying to avoid the sheriff from pulling them over at all costs. And the sheriff goes, oh, so you wanted them smart ends, And I think at that point I was like, oh, it's over.
And it's sad that we pick up on stuff because before he even did it, I'm like, dude, he's gonna find any BS reason to get you. And when he asked that, I was like, that's a damn shame that I've been conditioned to think like that. But it is what it is. Yeah.
So he actually doesn't even let them leave until Atticus says, pretty please, can you let this N-word, leave? They finally do. They finally get on the road, but the road's 25 miles per hour, and this begins like the most tense and suspenseful 25 miles per hour car chase that I have ever seen.
Because they're racing the sun at this point.
Yeah, they're racing the sun, and they can only go 25 miles per hour because they're trying to avoid being pulled over by the sheriff that's following them. Yeah,
closely
bumping them, doing whatever he can try to do to try to get them to mess up.
Yeah. And mind you, this is the same sheriff that the brother was like, here's his NAACP.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So I thought that was,
can you imagine like having to think like that, having to race the sun to get out of a town or a county because they'll hang you?
Yeah, no, I can't imagine that.
That's got to be the scariest feeling.
I fortunately grew up in a time where I didn't have to worry about that. Yeah. I'm glad I don't. But that just scene on its own was just like, I don't know if they gonna I was so worried for them. I was like, I've invested in these characters already. I know so much about them, I felt like, and I was just like, I'm so worried that they're not going to make it out of this town. Yeah. They actually do make it down before sundown. However, the sheriff has already got people waiting on them. For them.
They weren't going to get away.
Yeah, they weren't.
It was already stacked against them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So the sheriff and the rest of his police force take Atticus, George, and Letty out to the woods because they about to just shoot them and leave them there. And he's interrogating them like, why are y'all here? Are y'all responsible for the burglary? I think there was some burglaries that happened in the county. And Atticus kind of trips up because he calls the sheriff by name. And the sheriff is like, well, if you only been here for a little while, how do you know my name? And as soon as he said the sheriff's name, I was like,
dang it, man.
I was like, he gonna pick up on that. And he did.
Yeah.
But while they're sitting there, you know, threatening to shoot them, Letty, George, and Tick, they hear something in the woods, and the sheriff is just like, "Oh, it's just wolves." And I was like, "That don't sound like
right." Now,
wolves
mind
to
you,
me.
when they were at Letty's brother's house, he was saying that there was been known for like a lot of animal attacks and stuff in the area. So, at the worst case scenario, you think in your head, it's probably a bear or some animal wandering around in the forest.
That's not what it
That's
was.
not it.
Out of nowhere, this monster comes and just like bites this, you know, guy's arm off. And at that exact moment, I was like, "Oh shit!" I was like, "Oh my god, what's going on?" Like this went 0 to 100 real quick.
Right.
So everybody's at this point is freaking out.
I've never seen. Again, I love the appropriate response because God forbid, I love Uncle George, but when it came to Letty and Tick,
they was gone.
Out.
They left Uncle George. Uncle George got up to hop up, and it was so slow. I was like, "Yo, he ain't gonna make it," but he gets knocked down.
Yeah.
While Letty and Tick are running through the woods trying to get away from these monsters, and you know these monsters are picking off these policemen just like one by one. Eventually, Letty and Tick find this cabin, and right before they go in, Tick is like, "Wait, where's Uncle George?" I was like, "What?" It's too late for you to be worried about it. Y'all done ran a whole mile.
Y'all done left him. Look.
But you
left
know,
my
they're
man on the ground.
yeah. So they're in this, you know, cabin, and they're trying to keep the other. And all the while, people's heads are getting bitten off and everything by these animals. And so they're trying to keep the sheriff and I guess another one of his deputies out of the cabin.
Yeah.
They eventually get in, but you know, there's the sheriff and the deputy are still pointing guns at Letty and Tick like there's nothing else going on.
Like
you know?
literally looking like there's actual monsters outside.
And
you
y'all
pointing the gun at
two black
right. You just seen a monster bite somebody's arm and he wanted the guy's arm.
Right. The sheriff
right there.
Noticeably got his arm. It's not bitten off, but you can tell he's been bit.
Yeah.
And I'm just
and
like,
it's doing some funny shit.
Yeah,
too.
yeah. You can see things working around in there. But yeah, I was definitely like, y'all priorities messed up because y'all priorities is worried about the black people and then the monsters outside. Okay. But eventually we go back to Uncle George, who was knocked on the ground, but he hasn't been attacked by monsters yet. He, you know, gets a flashlight from a bit off hand and he makes his way through the woods, and as he makes his way through the woods he shines a light on one of the monsters, and this monster's just got eyes
everywhere
all around. But he eventually makes it to the cabin, and you know he lets, you know, they let him in. And
the police didn't want him to come in.
Yeah, the police was like, "Don't let him in, don't let him in," and Tick was like, "Yo, I'm not gonna leave him out there." So they eventually find out. And Uncle George says one of the best Dracula lines. It's one of my favorite, not one of the best. I don't know if it's one of the best, but it's one of my favorite lines from Dracula. Children of the Night, the music that they make. And so basically they're like, oh, they're kind of like vampires because we've been out here all day and haven't seen one. Anything. So, you know, and I made it all the way here with a flashlight and they didn't attack me, so they must be afraid of the light.
And again, this is a real Sundown.
Yeah, basically it's turned into a real Sundown County. Yeah. So
basically they were like, let me show you what Sundown really means.
Yeah. So they make the decision that, you know, they're going to run for Woody, which is Uncle George's car. Yeah. And at first Tick is going to go, but the sheriff and the deputy is like, no, Letty goes. So you guys don't leave us here, you know.
Yeah, we like...
Letty goes back to that. This had me rolling.
Classic.
Letty goes back to what all black people say when they need to run real fast. What did she say?
She said, all star,
all what? I wrote it down here.
Okay. I was all something in track, basically.
Yeah, basically. I was... but all conference or something like that. Like that's basically what every black person in every movie goes back to when they need to run fast. Like I was all conference and track back in high school, so I can do this.
Let me tell you, the way she ran out that diner, I wasn't.
I believe
I can see it.
I believe believed her.
Aerodynamic.
But you know that you get to see a little moment that Tick and Letty have because she's scared, obviously, and she's got to make this run. And Tick is like, "You can do this. You can do this." So
it basically, she's like,
like I'm scared. Shut up. You know, which is how I would be too. I'd be like, "Stop trying to pep talk me right now because ain't nothing gonna work."
It was hilarious because he was like, "Letty, you hear me? You like, will you leave me alone? Let me psych myself up." Like,
yeah. So she makes this mad dash to the car. And she does eventually make it. She does have some monster interactions, but she's able to, you know, fend them off with, I think, a camera flash of her camera. Because she does take pictures. Yeah, that's something that we haven't mentioned yet. And the lights from the car. All the while, back at the cabin, the sheriff is, like, starting to make noises and just, like, rattle around. And Uncle George is like, what happens to a person when they get bit by a vampire?
Right.
And, you know, Tick is looking at the sheriff and, you know, the deputy's like, Sheriff, you okay?
And they're like, shoot him.
Yeah, they're like, you need to shoot him now. And we just see the sheriff just right before our eyes in one of the best sequences in this episode turn into one of those monsters.
And I was about to say that was probably, you know, I love transformations. That was a very impressive transformation.
Good. Yeah.
Especially for it to be CGI, you know, sometimes things look really, really like fake. This one was actually really good the way, like the mechanics of his body shifted and everything and morphed. I was like, holy crap, the face got big, the mouth.
You know what it kind of reminded me of? And I know not a lot of people like this movie, but the transformation that Dracula was doing in the Van Helsing movie, that's what it reminded me of. Yeah.
Very. It was good.
Yeah. But, pretty much the deputy still doesn't shoot the sheriff.
And
so
the
he
sheriff bites his face like
whole
jaw.
Face off. And I'm just like,
I had to rewind that part because I was like...
I was so scared. Like, this legit, like, this whole episode legit had me, like, invested in these characters. And I was like, yo. So, pretty much, you know, the sheriff's about to come for Tick and George, but we hear Letty, you know, honking outside, and she actually rams the cabin and rams into this creature, knocks him out for a little bit, knocks out Uncle George, too, a little bit, so he's out of commission, but... You know, the sheriff creature gets up and jumps out the window, and Letty and Tick go outside, and they're surrounded by these creatures, basically.
Everywhere.
So they basically get, you know, flares out of Woody, and they're, like, throwing them all around, trying to fend off these monsters. And, like, they're looking like, okay, this is us for the night. We better settle in and, you know, try to figure out how to fend off these monsters for the rest of the night. And just when you think that they're going to have to do that, they hear, you know, this whistle come out of nowhere. And when that happens, these creatures just run away. Yeah. So this is the thing. This is going back to what Letty's brother was saying earlier on in the episode, where witch hunters founded the town, and they don't like, you know, trespassers, basically. So my feeling is, I think that these monsters actually are basically are the witch hunters' pets, basically. Saying,
they're hunting dogs.
Yeah, hunting dogs, basically. Just saying, you know, anybody who gets close to Artem, you're going to encounter these monsters because you ain't supposed to be over here anyways.
So basically, these are the wild animal attacks that they keep talking. Well, the brother was telling them about. It explains why this town really isn't marked.
Right. Yeah.
Because when you think about it, the whole reason they got into this situation was they was looking for that damn bridge, and they couldn't find it.
So. You know, all the monsters go away, and they're kind of like looking at each other like, did this stuff really just happen, you know? And we see them, like, you know, make it to the next day, and they're actually, you know, walking. We see them walking over the bridge. Yeah, they're bloody, like, they look tired. And this is something I really enjoyed in the episode, because I was like, there go that representation. Letty's hair, throughout this whole sequence, Letty's hair acted like a real black woman's hair. Like, when she was running around, it was, you know, sweaty and down and stuff and slick. But that next day, all them frizzes, I was like, somebody was paying attention. Because that's how her hair is supposed to look after she's been sweating and stuff like that, you know.
But you guys, like, they walk up to this big, like, mansion thing.
Yeah.
So all this time, you know, again, in the back of my head, I'm like, does this place even exist? Well, it exists, and there it is.
And as they're actually walking up to the door, they look to the side and they see that
Surprise.
silver Bentley that's been basically being seen through this whole episode. So Tick comes up to the door and he's just about to knock on the door, and the door opens on its own, and there's, you know, this white guy, blonde hair, and says, you know, welcome, Mr. Freeman, we've been expecting you, welcome home. And that's the end of the episode.
Now, wait a minute. So, let me clear my head real quick, because there's a lot of thoughts running around in it. That scene, to me, was really like, how do I want to say it? It started making things click in my head and made me start asking more questions. Like, okay, well, were the monsters really trying to get them? Or were they trying to get, like, the sheriff people?
Right.
Because I feel like if those monsters really, really wanted to get them, they probably would. They wouldn't have gone away. They wouldn't have called them off.
And this is what kind of tripped me up a little bit, because I thought that same exact thing. I rewatched the scene with Letty, and they were really actually trying to get Letty. So I was like, well, maybe I don't know if it was that case, that if they were really trying to get all of them, or if it's something about Freeman's that they weren't really trying to get, because Uncle George had walked all through this woods and he just had a flashlight, and they didn't mess with him at all.
Right.
At first, when I first watched this, I was like, oh, they using Uncle George to lead them till the rest of them are. But then I thought about it some more. I was like, wait a minute. Is it something with, like, Freeman's where they're just like, this bloodline I can't mess with, you know?
Yeah, because when you think about the Bentley coming in and protecting them, it's like, it's kind of like they're connected. And of course they say, like, oh, welcome home and stuff, and it makes sense, like, okay, that's where the mom's family was from, so apparently they must share a bloodline somewhere. You know?
And this is where I think, just my, I guess, predictions for the rest of the season, I'm thinking that Tick's family comes from a long line of witch hunters. And basically, once they get into this house, they're going to learn that, and they're going to be like, this is your destiny, this is what you are supposed to be doing, going around town and fighting these monsters, you know?
And guys, let's be very clear here, because the trailers and the sneak peeks that they showed, the bulk of it came from the first episode. This is the first episode.
So there's a lot more to come. And I don't think you were able to see it, but they did show us previews from upcoming episodes, and there is just a lot. There is a lot that I am so excited to see. There was one particular scene where I saw Hippolyta actually in some Amazon type gear, and it got me thinking. I was like, is she like a real Amazon?
Yeah, because remember when I was saying, I was like, her name's not a mistake. I was like, that's a pretty specific name. It means something. That can't be a mistake. You know?
But we also see Letty's sister gets involved in some things, and I am so ready for this series.
Man, shout out to HBO, because they've been knocking it out the park. You know, they had Outsiders, they Watchmen, and here you go again, another. If this episode is a representation of what this season is going to look like, geez, man.
Yeah, I'm hoping they're able to keep up this excitement for the next couple of episodes, because, you know, like you said, Outsiders was like a slow burn.
It was a slow burn, and I expected this to be kind of like that.
Thing.
I thought I was going to get a lot of character development in the first episode. Got the character development, but there was other stuff in there too. So it was like, I'm here for it.
Yeah, me too. I'm so excited to watch the next episode on Sunday. Definitely gonna have my notebook out taking notes. I know it's one of these. It's one of those type of shows, but I'm so ready. I'm so excited.
Definitely, and we hope you're excited about it too. If you haven't had an opportunity to check it out, man, you gotta give it a look, because I guarantee you're gonna be enthralled in it. I mean. Hopefully you didn't watch this before you watched
it.
But if you did, you know, it is what it is. But I think they're setting up so much more to come that everyone's just, this is the next big thing. This is the next
I agree.
Thing. And again, with not very much happening in the realm of TV and or movies right now, It's just one thing that just puts a smile on my face.
Yeah.
Awesome. So that was our review / breakdown of Sundown, episode 1 of Lovecraft Country.
The premiere episode.
We're going to keep this up. We're going to try to bring them up to you a little bit more quicker. Quickly. But definitely hope if you stuck around this long, definitely, again, thank you for watching. Make sure you drop down in those comments. Let us know what you think. Give us a like, subscribe if you want to stay up to date. We're gonna stick with this one.
Yep, most definitely. Again, it's one of those type of deals with we're gonna watch anyways. So, yeah, we'll bring it to you when we do.
All right. Well, until next time. Again, I'm Killer Cam,
and I'm Monique.
That was another episode of Blerd Up. We'll see you next go round.
Thanks, guys.